you have a very special guest today that you would want to introduce.
It is my pleasure to welcome a star who has dazzled the world from Bollywood to Hollywood, a woman who has made India proud, a woman who has won the Miss World title for India, a National Film Award, 5 Filmfare Awards, and listed by Forbes magazine as among the 100 most powerful women, by Time magazine as the 100 most influential women, a woman who's been my friend since her debut film in Bollywood, The Hero, The Story of a Spy. I welcome my friend and India's biggest international star, Priyanka Chopra.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Didn't have to recite all of that, but thank you so much.
It's important to remind people of all the things you've done. And this isn't even, this is just the surface. There's so much more you've done in your life and your career that I'm glad you wrote a book about it, because there's no other way people would know everything you've done. And I'm so glad that apart from writing your book, you found time to read my book too, which makes me very, very happy.
I have, and I have it right here for everyone to see. First of all, I mean, this picture, amazing. My mom, just for people who are watching who would not know, is the hugest Kabir Bedi fan, the hugest. Since she was 19 years old, she had a huge poster of him when she was growing up. And I remember when I first signed up Hero, she was not excited about the fact that I signed this movie with Sunny Deol. It was Anil Sharma after Gadar. She was most excited about the fact that I was working with you. So
that's so lovely to hear. So
thank
lovely
you for
to hear.
being one of my first co-actors. You've had such an incredibly prolific life, and I agree with the title of this book, that these are stories that you must tell. And you know, you've experienced so much of life in the span of a professional and personal existence that you've had for so long, and there's so much that we can learn through it. If you don't mind, for people who are going to see this book, and everybody must read it, I will get into asking you questions, but we should launch your book, shouldn't we?
Launch the book, Priyanka. This is...
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Stories I Must Tell by the incredible Kabir Bedi, who has had an amazing life. He was one of the first actors to actually transcend beyond India into the world and, you know, seek work in America and in Hollywood and outside of India, and was very successful at it. So you really paved the way for people like me. And this book is an amazing read, and I would really recommend it to everyone to go grab it.
Both hold it up together. Let's both hold it up together. Yay! That's what we want. That's the shot.
And it's launched.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Buy the book wherever books are sold.
Thank you for saying that, Priyanka. Coming from you, I can't tell you how happy it makes me that you're doing this for me and honoring our friendship, our relationship, and our mutual support for each other over these years. It feels it's a very special moment in my life. Thank you for that, Priyanka. Thank you.
Of course, I'm always here.
And you're right, I did set off for India at that time. I was probably the first Bollywood actor that made a career and a home in Hollywood. But it was tough going those days, tough going.
Tell me what was hard about it, like because I want to understand compared to, because for me also it was very difficult as an Indian seeking work in Hollywood per se.
Right.
But when you did it with such aplomb. You were one of the first people. What was it like at that time?
Well, I did it with a lot of aplomb. I had stardom in Europe behind me as I was the rage across the continent. I came to Hollywood as a newcomer. I thought they'd be impressed by that. They didn't know, they didn't care. I lived in a house in Beverly Hills. I bought myself a Mercedes. Nobody gave a damn. I got Rogers and Cowan, the best PR firm in the world, working for me. I had William Morris and Rick Nisita at William Morris at that time working for me. Not a dent. So the problem was that in those days, Hollywood just wasn't writing roles for Indians or Asians in general. And so how do you get a role if it's not written for you? And I would protest in the trade papers saying that this is wrong. And when they did have a role for an Asian, they had no hesitation in painting a white actor brown and giving him the role. So this was the other problem. So the way I got roles was by telling my agent, look, forget the Indian bit. Cast me in anything that's foreign looking to Hollywood, because everything that's foreign is in one broad brushstroke for them. And that's how I got my roles. In the James Bond film, I was actually cast as an Indian. But in Ashanti with Michael Caine, I played a Tuareg tribesman. In The Bold and Beautiful, I played a Moroccan prince. So it was playing the foreign tag that got me the roles. And these are all things that make a huge difference. In those days, Ben Kingsley had to change his name from Krishna Bhanji to Ben Kingsley to be taken seriously and get roles. Today, a Priyanka Chopra does not have to change her name to have success in America. There's a difference in
But
the time.
let me tell you, this is however many years later, a couple of decades later, when I decided to go and seek work in America. And I didn't have to change my name, but I had to teach people how to say my name, first of all, because everybody was Priyanka Chopra, Chopra. It's not Chopra. It's like, if you can say Oprah, you can say Chopra. You know, it's not
Right,
very difficult.
right.
But what I had to do as well, which is so funny that you're saying you had to do at that time, was I had to be ethnically ambiguous to a certain
Yes,
extent to be able to get mainstream roles. For me
right.
to get mainstream roles, like even Quantico for that matter, I played a half Indian, half American. Baywatch, like all my bigger work initially when I first joined Hollywood, I couldn't step out there with being Indian because it was too alien for Hollywood. I don't think for a very long time they understood casting an Indian person in a mainstream role as a leading part. So even now, it was extremely hard. Once I got their attention, playing an
Yes,
ethnically ambiguous role, now I am getting the chance to do Indian, like play Indian characters, like the White Tiger or my movie with Mindy. But it's an education that is a consistent requirement, and it's my life's dream, honestly, to see a lot more Indians influx Hollywood because we have one of the largest film industries in the world. We are literally
we do, we do,
trained.
we do. And but fortunately, by the same measure, a lot of Indians have made waves
Totally.
in the West, and that gives me great joy because that was
Me too.
unthinkable at that time. The nature of Hollywood has always been a bit insular, but it was far more so in those days. So I
Absolutely, I
must,
can imagine.
so I mean, you've seen the difficulties of getting into Hollywood, even coming at your level. Um, I faced twice that. And I must say, I have to thank Hollywood for giving me vast global fan bases by, Bold and Beautiful gets 400 million people watching a day. A Bond film is the longest running film franchise in history. It has fan clubs, merchandise, conventions, everything around it. And as you've seen from Quantico, the power of television is absolutely enormous, especially when it goes global
Huge.
and huge, huge. So I have to thank America for that. Even though my journey was probably harder than, than yours has been, although I don't know the inside story, maybe you can enlighten us. But there is the good thing is my son is there in Los Angeles, Adam. He's flying the Bedi flag, doing special effects, and very successful at that. But really speaking, with these changing times, to see you up there is it just fills me with joy and glory. And I think you should be in a Bond film too. I think they should
I think I
call on
should
you.
play Bond.
You should play Bond. You should play Bond. Although Her Majesty's Secret Service, yes, also must insist on diversity. Uh,
Just a joke. I don't know if in our lifetime we'll see that. But listen, thank you for being so kind. But if you don't mind, I would love to sort of delve into, Kabir Bedi, the person, like what you talk about in your book, which is what moved me the most, is you've talked about some really difficult things in your book, which people may know of because you're a public person and there's so much written about you and speculated about you, of course. But you've spoken very candidly in your book about, your marriages and specifically your son's death. That chapter really, really moved me when I was reading that. And was it hard to, like having speculated, having had so much speculation, and of course you got ahead of it and made a statement when it happened. But is it hard to remember something like that all over again and, actually write it down?
Priyanka, firstly, it's the difficulty of actually having lived that situation and tried your best to pull him back from the brink and dealing with a person with schizophrenia. To go back and relive that is also cathartic because I actually have to remember a lot of things. I was lucky in one sense that I kept a lot of notes of those days, what happened in those days. So a lot of those things came back. But while writing it, to go through the emotions of every scene that happened was extremely, extremely moving. It brings you to tears again because it brings back memories that were very wounding at the time. And in a situation like that, the pain of the wounds recedes, but the scars remain, and and what is done to your psyche remains. So yes, it's not easy to revisit those things, but I felt firstly to share my own experience, but secondly also to promote a greater sense of tolerance for people's families that suffer from, who are dealing with patients that suffer from schizophrenia and other mental illnesses. There's a lot of stigma in India.
Massive stigma.
And I think people should see things with more compassion. That's one of the other reasons that I wrote this. I have tried to be as honestly open as I can in sharing my experiences of relationships and people that are known in the wider world. And I did so with great depth because, as you see in my style of writing, I prefer to show, not tell. I actually re-evoke the scenes that happen, so
it's very visual
it.
actually when you read your book, and it's something that I kind of did with mine. And I think maybe we are actors, so we think visually. So when you end up writing like a scene, this is what happened. So your reader is actually, I could sense the room that I was in when you were writing. And having that's my favorite kind of book, is when it feels visually, it like sucks you in, and that you really do that with your writing in your book. You mentioned a lot about spirituality too, and I know, of course, your mother being who she is and being, the Buddhist and at the highest position in Buddhism. How is spirituality, like, what is your relationship with spirituality since you were younger, since you were 19 and interviewed the Beatles? Like, we have to talk about that also. But from then to now, how has your relationship with spirituality changed?
Priyanka, spirituality has always been a part of my life because my father is a descendant of Guru Baba Nanak, and my mother was a person who was always seeking. And I was part of her journey when she discovered Buddhism. In fact, in the earliest years, I went to Burma and became a Buddhist monk. And those influences, and then the Hindu ethos of our country is also something that deeply influences me. But I was always spiritually curious. So I would go to the New Age gurus, the Jiddu Krishnamurtis, the Oshos, the Deepak Chopras, and listen to what they had to say, and many other New Age philosophers, trying to find out what is the truth. Somebody says there's reincarnation, somebody says there's not, somebody says there's hell, somebody says there's not, somebody says there's destiny, somebody says there's free will. Somebody says one God, many gods. Who's telling us the truth? And that's been a running theme throughout my life and my search to find out what really is, for me, the truth that resonates. And I've shared my conclusions in the book in terms of what I've arrived at right now. I won't give that away because firstly, it's too long to explain. And secondly, you got to
Yes,
read
it
the
must
book to
be
see it.
read to understand it, actually. It's
Right.
very spoken, you've spoken about it really in depth. And I have, I think about that a lot as well, like what really is the truth and what different religions teach us, and the fact that eventually they all meet at the same place. And that's really what faith is. But
Right.
I was very curious when I read your conclusions, and I would recommend that to everyone out there as well.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
tell me, being a biracial kid, what was that like in your childhood? You know,
I never had the sense of biraciality. I always sensed I was Indian because my mother was so Indian. From
right?
the day she got married, she never wore Western clothes. She completely adopted India uh, with her heart. And in fact, there's a beautiful letter that she wrote my father's brother when he opposed the marriage. And that brings tears to your eyes because that shows the commitment she has to India. And it's a tremendously poetic letter. Um, this was a woman who was Gandhi and Satyagrahi. This was a woman who lost a son because of the pressures and problems of living through the freedom struggle with no money. Um, so, religion in all forms has always been a very important part of my life. I don't say I belong to any particular religion, but I have
Hmm.
taken much from many. I've taken much from many. And that's part of my journey, which I've shared. But let me talk about your book too. At this point, uh, let me say, what does it feel like to be on the New York Times bestseller list?
It was mad. It was mad. The first, when I got that call, I was like, and it happened in just a few days, in less than a week. And I remember I was so nervous about writing the book, Kabir sir, because I've always wanted to write. Writing is something I find very fascinating. I'm a voracious reader. I consume a lot of writing, but
Mm,
writing myself had always scared me. And to get that kind of acceptation, for people actually to really enjoy the book and the writing of it, not just, the I guess the celebrity of it all. I really appreciated that. It was really a dream come true for me. So thank you.
so, when you write your next book, are you going to title it "Still Not Finished"?
I hope I'm not finished till the end of my
No,
life.
still not finished. Still not
Yeah,
finished.
yeah,
So,
probably.
what I found very fascinating in your book was that this whole journey of coming into showbiz began with your brother suggesting you enter the beauty pageant because he wanted a room in the house for himself. And that's
He's
how
so
the whole journey
ingenious.
began that led you into becoming Miss World, that led eventually to films in Bollywood, which eventually took you to Hollywood. But all started with your brother's desire for a room.
Yeah, it's
I
so
found that
funny.
fascinating. But also you said in the book that you have a thing called a Chopra family plan, which involved preparation, logical thought, and strategy, right? This is the Chopra family plan. Did you use this Chopra family plan to make a career in Hollywood, or did that happen just by accident? Because I heard you first went there to do. I read that you first went there to do a music album.
It was planned and sort of also happened. My whole life feels almost like destiny has a plan for me, but I recognize opportunities. I'm not someone who lets an opportunity go by.
Hmm.
Whether it's a meeting, whether it's someone I meet, or whether it's someone who says something to me. And I remember being curious about seeking work in the West. I was at a point in my work in Bollywood where I wanted to expand my wings. I wanted to do work that made me feel challenged. And when I went to do music, music was something I've always loved. When I went to do music in the States, music and movies are all very intermixed. So when
Right.
you're going to the
Yeah.
parties, you're meeting musicians and actors and directors, like it's all the same industry almost. So while I was doing music over there, which I creatively thought that I was failing at myself, I didn't end up making the kind of music that I thought was made a dent. And I was struggling with what I wanted to do, and few people told me that you should seek representation in America. And I asked why do they think that? Because I was doing a lot of work in America and in India, and I knew it would take away time. And you know how a female actor's career is in India. अगर आपके पास वक्त नहीं होगा, आप फिल्में नहीं कर सकते हो, तो फिर कोई और कर लेगा. So there was always that thought of, oh my gosh, should I take a risk of not doing the 4 films that you have to do to survive? But I guess I'm a gambler.
But I noticed that keeping a career alive on 3 continents is not easy. So if you stay in Hollywood, Europe forgets you. Stay in Europe, both forget you, Bollywood and Hollywood. So
I guess I'm lucky that
conjuring act
totally
of trying to look as though you're everywhere at once at the same time.
But Kabir sir, I have to say, like, the internet and being able to live in this age of information has really made that possible. Like right now, I've worked in India and I've worked in America simultaneously for the last like 10 years. And I didn't feel the need for them to be mutually exclusive. I did films here and I did films there. I flew down back and forth continents. And I think that may have been the difference between like your time to not live in this age of information.
Absolutely. Huge difference.
Absolutely.
I mean, those days you had to book a telephone call. The fastest form of communication was the fax,
Wow. Imagine.
It was, I remember a person coming to me in LA in the early 90s saying, Mr. Bedi, have you heard of this thing called email? You push a button here and it is there. You push a button here, it is there in India. So we've lived through those times.
And technology really has changed the game in, for entertainment. But listen, before I run out of time, I want to definitely ask you about the Beatles thing. So the Beatles at that time, 60s, 70s, I mean, the Beatles, and just you got to interview them. What was that like? You were a kid.
I was a cub reporter working for All India Radio, trying to pay my way through college by making some money on the side. And why did they choose
you? Like, why were they like, yeah, this guy is right to interview the Beatles? Like,
well, because most people in All India Radio didn't know who the Beatles were. I was their crazy fan, and I thought if I get a gig to interview them, that'll be great. So I went to my boss and I said, please give me a tape recorder, allow me to interview the Beatles. They laughed me off. They said, the whole Delhi press corps is trying to get in. How are you going to get in? I said, I will. Just give me the tape recorder. I'll do my best. I got this tape recorder, and being a Beatles fan, I knew that I had to get through to their manager. And everyone was trying to chase the Beatles. I stalked out the manager, found him out. I knew his vulnerability because they'd just been in Philippines and they had a big problem there with the government. And I told him I was from the government, and the government had scheduled an interview and they'd get into a lot of trouble if they didn't do the interview. So I finagled my way into that interview. Actually, he agreed to give the interview. The boys will not give the interview. I will do the interview. I said, fine. So when I went to see him, he just wasn't well. So he walked me across the length of the floor and said, boys, do me a favor, give this guy an interview. And I got the interview with the Beatles. So
wow, you were a hustler.
Well, you had to be a little smart. You had to
see, that's what I mean about recognizing opportunity.
That's right. I did.
And creating it for yourself.
And that interview and the way All India Radio treated it afterwards led to such disillusionment within me that it caused me to leave Delhi, come to Bombay, begin a career in advertising, which led to a career in theater, which led to films. So that was one of the great pivotal moments of my life, and changed the course of my life, because then from Bollywood, of course, I got the Sandokan series in Europe, and that made huge waves out there and made me a big star on the continent. So little things can have enormously large consequences, as we've seen.
I remember images of you being, and as a kid, I remember this, of all of these like European fans running after you, and like in Spain specifically, like people, when you're getting into your car, people were like, ah! It was incredible to see. Like when I talk about actors before me from India who've been able to, make the dent and hence pave the way for me to be able to demand the kind of roles that I want to do and you're the pioneer of that. So thank you for paving the way for us and actors like
Thank
me
you.
who are seeking the work internationally.
Thank you, and thank you for coming and honoring me by this book launch. And as one debut author to another, I thank you for launching my book. It's a book about the making, breaking, and remaking of me as a man. It's an emotional story, and I'd like people to read it and share it. And before you step out of the program, I just want to say a big hello to Nick and to Madhuji, who I care about a lot. I met you both at your wedding with Nick when you invited me to the reception. So I have fond memories of that.
I will definitely tell him. He's outside so that we are not disturbed, but I will tell him that. And my mom will probably faint. So.
No. Please get a big hug from me. And thank you so much, Priyanka, for coming and sharing this wonderful day and occasion with me.